Hi, everybody, and welcome to RHAP's coverage of Australian Survivor Redemption. My name is Mike Bloom, and I am here delightfully eating some crow. But 24 hours ago, I came onto this very podcast and I said, you know what? A clear, concrete majority was set up at the merge. I think we're going to have a nice couple of easy votes, ease everyone into the new temperature waters of this hot tub that is the post merge. But no, this group did a freaking cannonball this episode, as seemingly by the end of this, in multiple ways, a lot of alliances, dynamics have been shaken up in so many ways. And of course, I'm so happy to be joined by somebody who just a week ago, Pooya, we were talking about another middle episode that had a wild vote that changed in the middle of tribal council. This time, at least there's a person actually getting eliminated alongside it. So it really is having your cake and eating it too.
Shout out to the middle episode, holding me on its back and giving me something to talk about. This was so fun.
Yeah.
It was fun. It had a little bit of everything. I feel like there was a lot of journey. For a season called Redemption, there was a lot of journey to be spoken about here. So I'm very pumped.
I am so excited to get into all this because, of course, we have all the excitement building around a lot of these players trying to hit their mark and Mark hitting back in a manner of speaking. Obviously, we have a lot of the posturing and positioning and repositioning that was happening at Tribal Council. But I even think, Pooya, the storytelling in this episode was top notch because I realized that, look, it's safe to say that so far through 14 episodes of Australian Survivor Redemption, Mark Warnock is our main character. Take it or leave it, your opinion about Mark in general, but Mark has gotten far and away the most confessionals. He has been to a lot of tribal councils, not as many as, unfortunately, the man we're going to send off today. But, you know, he's been a good part of it, and he's also been a good part of the planning and moves behind it, putting everything into motion. But what this episode really interestingly set up for me, Pooya, was what Mark is to other people. We get a lot of perspective as to who other people are to Mark, right? What he sees in a person. But what becomes such a fun straw to stir this delicious drink in this episode is some people seeing Mark as sort of like this big threat, this returnee who they need to get rid of sooner rather than later. But perhaps more interestingly, you have some people, including fellow returnees around Mark, who now have expressed to us why they need him and what role he serves in their game. So that's what's so fun about this. Mark obviously does a lot of dramatic wackadoo stuff at Tribal Council to save himself. But when you think about it, it's almost like all the action is kind of happening around Mark. Mark's kind of the MacGuffin in this episode.
Yeah, I feel like Mark is kind of the name that they're going to put out there, but I think ultimately everyone is thinking about a world pre or post Mark, the world they had pre Mark, and there's only a couple of people that are like, yeah, but the world after Mark will not be a good one for me. Besides that, it really feels like Mark himself's game doesn't come into play until he's at Tribal.
Yeah.
But also he has an idol already. So like everything he's gonna do there is coming from a place of I know I'm safe now. So let me have fun. Let me get into their heads. Let me put some fear into them, which I think is such an underrated move. I think not enough people think about the fact of, because I think especially when we talk new era, we talk modern day, we just talk 2026. I think there's a lot of hey, it's a game. We all know it's a game, but also check your ego at the door. Don't get cocky. Don't be irritating. And I think Mark doesn't care. Mark is like, you put my name down, I'm kind of gonna try and aura farm on the way out. I'm gonna make sure that I make you look a little bit stupid and I stand tall, and then I go from there. And I think it's very underrated. And I think for me, it's entertaining. Now, I know you prefaced the idea of, hey, love him or hate him, this has been Mark's story. I've told you famously, I've not been keeping up with the social media side of things. It doesn't surprise me if Mark is a polarizing character. It really doesn't.
Yeah.
But I think you need that. I think you need, if you have other favorites, you want to pray for Mark's downfall for your favorites. Your favorites are trying to get him out, but also at the same time, Mark is your favorite. You have to watch him, fight for his supper, because at the end of the day, there are only 3 returnees currently on the show, and Mark is the one that does the most of the 3, I would say.
In so many ways. Well, I think it would benefit us the most, again, if we walk sort of chronologically through the main line in this episode, which is this massive rolling snowball onto Mark, again, for Mark to only sort of like take a flamethrower to that snowball and melt it all by the end of the episode. But let's let's really start here with, again, in the beginning, the episode really had us, basically through the immunity challenge, right? It seemed very simple. Okay, just pile on Blanche. This is also the idea of, like, again, last person before jury. Who do you not want to sit there? Mark is clearly not really on the same page as Blanche, never really has been. She's voted in the minority the entire time. But then, Pooya, we get a familiar tune here as we have some of the Beauty and the Beast members meet and be like, I think it's our turn to try to undercut Mark by getting rid of one of his allies. And listen, we will get into the whole revolution that's attempted to be mounted here. I will give my kudos to Ben and all of these newbies. At least they finally took the shot at the man himself instead of saying for the umpteenth time, all right, we could go for Mark, or we could try to cut his fingernails really close by getting rid of someone who's close to him.
Yeah, which, hey, newsflash, the more you do that, the more there's a new person that's his closest. That's always going to be a closest person with Mark. So that's the thing, right? It was fun. I think it was fun to see them all kind of come to this agreement of, if we wait right now, we're going to let the game pass us by. This is our one moment. How many times have we talked about, hey, don't wait till it's too late. You never know what next day is going to bring. You don't know what the dynamics are going to be after this vote out. If you have the numbers, you need to do something, do it now. Lest, you don't make a move and then become memed for it many seasons later. And everyone's talking about, like, what happened to your move, huh? Did you not do it? So I like that. Okay. That being said, I don't think they did it well. And here's why.
Okay.
I think we got a little too cute. I think they're also focused on, well, Mark's number. Maybe we get rid of one of Mark's closest allies. It's time for Mark now. Not realizing, hey, maybe I might incorrectly think I can talk to Simon. Maybe I can talk to these other people that are also kind of close to Mark and convince them that Mark needs not be here. Because I think we also saw that. We saw too many of Mark's allies get tipped off and then just not want to do this, which then allows them to, figure out a contingency.
Right. That is the thing, is that, and this was so fun too, because who put a freaking nickel in Ben? Durag Devo here, just like coming out of nowhere, luxuriating with all the energy of like a power plant, with how great he feels about trying to unite all these people behind a cause. I mean, again, it's really fun, right? Because nobody wants a predictable season, especially one that, again, is like, okay, as Simon sort of says, oh, lots of returning players are running circles around these newbies. It almost feels like cheating. We don't necessarily want them to just serve as cannon fodder to what were 4 are now 3 players. So it's fun to watch them, again, try to put together kind of like, I wouldn't even say Baby's first Blindside, because they had the Asha Blindside. But as you mentioned, it gets a little too cute when they start trying to communicate this to everybody. It actually reminds me a bit of when you had the 3 wise women, who were not at the time the 3 wise women, trying to make that move on Caleb in episode 6 during the Johnson boot. And they're like, okay, we want this to happen, so let's tell as many people as possible, and maybe a name will stick here or there. Because it did seem like, again, there's a reason why Mark still gets all those votes despite all of his tribal council shenanigans. Like, there was a cemented block ready to go in there and vote for him. But I think it was, my assumption would be, at least given our read of the episode, and obviously I'll talk to Richard about this, it was the fact that I think Richard felt so indebted to Simon. Gee, can't imagine why. You haven't looked at episodes 7 through 12 at all. What could have Simon have possibly done multiple times over to make Rich feel like he should at least do him the service of knowing that Mark was going? But as you mentioned, that really was the first domino to be tipped over, because Simon, ergo Brooke, do not want Mark to go immediately. Give me your thoughts on this. Did their rationale make sense of how Mark is a shield for them, despite the fact that they are also returnees?
I feel like, yeah, because Mark, we already mentioned, Mark does the most. Simon is playing a very middle game, meaning I'm going to stay quiet, I'm going to nod on both sides, and then I'm going to pick a side and then patch up the other side if they're too upset with me for not going that way. Brooke literally just won the merge immunity. The first immunity of the merge era. So I think as a returnee, Brooke is a very concerned player of, I need to have as many threats or bigger names, or, and threats can come in many ways. They can either be a name entity or a challenge beast or a strategic mastermind. Mark embodies quite a few of those, checks a couple of those boxes. So I think keeping him makes sense for her as well. I think for the returnees, the last thing you want is to be like the lone returnee, or the last thing you want is to allow the newbies, the new players, to get a taste of returnee again and be like, this was tasty. Let's run it back tomorrow. I would like another returnee on my plate. And I think that's then you're giving them too much. And it's going to be a bit of a situation.
That's exactly what it is for me. I think it's a very understandable, logical leap to make, especially given, even despite the whole telling Simon thing, Ben in particular was not exactly incredibly secret at that tribal council, saying what I think are some really badass words, right? Of like, hey, returnees, thanks for teaching us all you know. Now we're going to use your own lessons against you. But like, could you have a bigger target as to who exactly you're going after, both during this and after this? You're learning the wrong lesson from Asha here about really projecting what the hierarchy is at tribal council. And yet again, that person was left surprised, and Ben nearly became the Asha at that point. So I do think it makes sense. Yes, of course, there are always going to be the cries of like, but why not get rid of Mark now, even if you're a Simon or a Brooke? Can't he beat you in the end? But I think they both bring up really good points, that especially if Mark does go here, and specifically under the logic of like, hey, he's a returning player. Well, now you're 2, maybe 2.5 with Keeley, considering that she has been apparently adopted as a returning player, against 9 other people who have all pretty much voted in unanimity against a returning player. That's really tough to finagle your way into. And I actually do feel like for both of them, he does seem like a legitimate shield. Like, it feels like neither one of their names have been brought up the past couple of episodes. Neither one of their names have been brought up, and we hear a lot of the cross-tribal scuttlebutt in this pre-merge of, oh, who's running things? Nobody's saying, oh, yeah, there was maybe a mention of Brooke, but it was always Mark, Faith, Keeley, Lottie, Asha, no Simon, not really Brooke. And I think they want to keep it that way moving forward. And you could argue after this, I don't know, there might be a certain amount of people that are like, we tried the Merc thing, it's not going to work. Let's go on to another thing that might stick more. But there's also a very reasonable chance that people are like, wow, Mark, look what you just did. Well, makes you want to gun for you even harder now next time.
Yeah, I think there's that. I think that when someone makes a power move, a couple of things can happen. One is exactly what you said, the double down. Okay, I already thought so, and now that you did this, it even further solidified. I cannot have you get anywhere close to getting some traction in this game and build momentum on this. I think the second thing can be fear. I think that the way Mark plays and the way he looks at his opponents, it really is the Toy Story Andy meme that when Andy's like, I don't want to play with you anymore, and it's Woody just falling to the ground. He's done that with Tez. He's done that with Richard. Don't piss him off because he will go after you. So I think putting fear in his opponents isn't bad. He literally talks to Ben, says to Ben's face, you might be cooked after this. I don't know. We'll see. And then spares him. I could see something like that changing. I could see some people being like, okay, I'm not going to do that. I think the other thing is you got to look at the other people that were alongside the ride with Mark, your Brooks, your Keeleys, and your Simons, who Brooke and Simon have a lot of other connections in this tribe. A lot of them who, formed a revolution to do this. Are they going to be willing to look Brooke and Simon in the eyes now and be like, I'm against you? I don't necessarily think so. I think a couple of them are going to crawl right back to Brooke, crawl right back to Simon. I think all those two need to do is say something to the effect of, listen, I agree with you. We just can't do it right now. We will do it later. And they'll be like, oh my God, we will do it later with less of them because I'll be closer to the end. You know what? You are right. Let's go Blanche this time. Why are we complicating things? I think you can look at the case of Richard as, hey, you touch the hot stove. Are you going to touch it again? Or are we going to takeout? Takeout's fun. Takeout's good. Let's just do takeout.
What Ben says at Tribal Council, we found our own voice and we feel like we're using our voice now. It's certainly a topic that I brought up a number of times, Pooya, on this podcast about the possibility of an unspoken Survivor Guatemala-esque agreement between these newbies of if it is a veteran and a newbie in the end, we are not going to give the returnee the win. Based on what we hear people saying in this episode, do you think that theory holds water at all, or do you still think that these three could stand a chance against the newbie in a final 2 or final 3?
I think that the theory holds water to me. I think it does hold water. I think it definitely makes sense if you're a newbie to when you're looking at some players here who have had multiple chances, Mark being the only one that really, is fresh and new to the returnee scene. I think it makes sense to be like, this is our season. This is redemption. We are here to redeem the prize and not other people. I think that's fine. I think on the other side, though, if a player like Mark or Brooke or Lily Simon, all three of them are playing stellar games, if any of them are at the end and know their way around a final travel, know how to speak at these things, I think it's gonna be hard. I don't think it's a unanimous like, nope, we made this pact. We're just gonna go ahead and give the win to Laws as we all agreed. I don't think that's the case. I think minds will change. I think Ponderosa can change people. Maybe I'm hoping that's the case. It really depends who's sitting there at the end. But I think the pact is there. I think it's an agreement made. It's also an agreement that helps everybody. It's kind of like, it's like if Mike, if you and I said, okay, well, if one of us is at the end against either of the other two recappers, we're voting each other. Easy done, right? Easy, great for me. But at the same time, then if Shannon gets on and does a compelling speech on why she should be the winner, you are a player at the end of the day.
Yeah.
Even though you said that to me, and if it merits it, I think you would give it to her.
Yeah, it's very true. I think a lot can change between the time you're voted off and when you're casting that final vote, even if it is the next day. I also think going back to, in particular, Brooke's perspective here, and actually it applies to Simon as well. I think she brought up a really salient argument about the idol. And listen, she had that information, right? She seemingly was the only person. Even Keeley did not know about the idol that Mark found. And so it was able to do her sort of a secondary benefit too, in that it would, if he flushes the idol, essentially, then it goes back into the game. Now, look, you could also say, okay, but if he was voted out with the idol, the same thing would happen. But again, this provides double the benefits in that you still do keep Mark around, who again is useful for your positioning in the game at this point, that somehow you have been completely under the radar despite being the odds on target at that Asha vote, but 7 days ago or so. And there's another idol out there, and you've already found two of these suckers. You're got pretty, if we're doing some betting odds right now, you're probably the best chance right now of making some good money by finding a third idol in this game, considering that you're an idol hound at this point.
Yeah, I could never imagine. Well, I could. I just have to play 3 times to really, put myself in their shoes. But I could never imagine being a threat my 2 seasons, coming in here, being one of 3 now remaining, having found an idol and publicly played it so people know I've got something. I can still have a knack for these. Winning the merge immunity and then just going up, like playing the rest of the game, not petrified of every person. I don't care if they're newbies. There's a lot of them. Like I'm going to be worried. But Brooke is just such a cool agent in all these situations. She does not want Mark to go. She doesn't even go, like she doesn't immediately push back, Mark, sidebar, what do you talk? She gives him a look. And
the Brooke look.
If I'm ever playing charades, I want Brooke look on my team because what do you mean you looked at him and Mark was like, yup, playing the idol tonight.
I understand everything. Yeah.
That is the type of connection you hope for, and a lot of us get in our like soulmate marriages, where I'm like, I can look at Liana, she can look at me like, yep, we both have the same opinion about this person. We can talk about it later. Brooke has it so simply on the island. Incredible.
Considering the fact as well that maybe they did some discussions prior to the season, but like, they are not necessarily friendly with one another, certainly not to the extent that Mark and Simon were prior to this season. Brooke has largely divorced herself from like the Australian Survivor community, as I recall, before coming into this. So it's not like, okay, we're setting up a code that we need to communicate here. It just seems like spending enough time together on Baron 1.0 gave him this sort of like internal like returnee dar, almost like twins, where they're able to read each other's minds. Though, again, when we get to Tribal Council, it's not exactly, even the most illiterate, Leah Michelle herself could understand what was going on at that Tribal Council, considering Ben saying, again, we're using our voice, Richard being like, it's not evolution, it's revolution.
That was a great line.
This Tribal Council is full of incredible lines. The storytelling, like, we'll get into it, but the exchanges that Mark and Richard are having as he idles him out of the game simultaneously is absolutely beautiful. Though I will say this is the worst I felt for David Janae, besides obviously him having to, live in such a massive man's shadow, because this guy could just be saying watermelon, watermelon, and reading out his grocery list because nobody cares about tribal council. It's essentially just an excuse for people to get together and start whispering to each other in the middle of the proceedings.
Yeah, I find that when in a group setting, it depends on the person. It's easy to be like, hey, everyone, come on, quiet. When you know everybody well. When you are new, like if this is like the new hire comes in and is told, you have to, or the substitute teacher is like, hey, you have to now control this class. And the class has they've known each other for quite a while now. They do not care who's in front of them. They're doing what they need to do. It's so distracting. It's a lot going on. But also, I think David as a player recognizes in these moments of like, you know what? It doesn't matter what I'm saying. Let them play the game. I think having a player be the host now can allow for moments like that. Whereas like you kind of just have to give it space, let it go. Don't need to do too much about it. Don't need to bring too much attention to it. Just kind of talk around it, and something might stick or not. They'll use some of your lines, and some of them will get lost now.
It's a little bit of a win-win too, because I know that people certainly complain sometimes about like Jeff as a moderator at Tribal Council trying to shoehorn in metaphors, or having to play ball with the fact that these players give these generic answers because they're not giving anything away. And maybe that's true here. They're more so giving things away by like who they're pulling aside, or people that they're outright tripping over their feet trying to get to in the moment. But I want to start here with this interaction between Mark and Ben, because as you mentioned before, I think we really have honed in like what Mark's tactic is when he's backed into a wall. All players have different ways that they react when they feel like they are cornered. And Mark goes full et tu brute. I don't know if I want to use the word guilting, but it kind of feels like guilting, right? It certainly does with Rich, with Ben, to be like, why'd you do this to me, man? Why'd you have to do it? And what is interesting is that Ben outright sort of just looks him in the eye and says, yeah, bet. Sorry, I had to do it. I'm taking you on. And we'll compare it to the interaction with Richard later. I wonder if low-key this saved Ben. Was this something that Mark had in his head later on of like, you know what? I do have some respect for Ben here, that at least like he could look me in the eye and tell me that he was gunning for me, whereas Richard can't.
I think so. I think there's definitely, and like the way Ben did it, it didn't seem slimy. It didn't seem like backhanded. He was just like, it was like respectfully, man. Like I gotta do what I gotta do. Whereas I think with, and also think of it this way, Mike, him and Richard, right? How many times has he saved this man and been like, hey, they've told me to keep him. We're going to keep him. I'm trying my best. We're going to work on this. And like, they've been seeing Richard as this piece to the other side for quite a while. And I think ultimately, if you think about it, Richard went rogue and got Keeley onto that island a week ago when we talked. So part of me is like, yeah, Richard is a little bit more of a unknown quantity now. I think if you've been with Richard that long and it took him, one cycle to then want to vote you here and be part of his vote dump on you, you don't need him anymore. And I think this is kind of what happened with Tez a little bit, where he's like, you're useless to me now. Again, the Andy meme, he was like, goodbye, I can't play with you anymore. It's gone. Ben is still somewhat, I think Ben benefits from a couple of things. Ben is a athletic person who clearly wanted to grab the game by the horns, but I think what he showed Mark in that moment was he's still also like an honest guy. Because we've seen the athletic archetype kind of just be like about that honor. I feel like he honored that by basically confirming it to Mark. Like, if you're Mark now, if I pull Ben's sidebar next time and look at him in the face and say, are you going after me? He will say yes or no, and I will know what the answer is without a second thought.
That's a really good point, because I was ready to come in here and say that I did not think Richard was the right target for Mark specifically, that I thought that this was somebody who at least had the chance of being someone in your corner, whereas here is a guy who is openly saying that he is against you, including to your face. But I wonder if, as you mentioned, that is, again, something that helped Ben stay in the game here, is this idea of the devil you know is better than the devil you don't. This guy, either he's going to outright tell me what's going on, or I'm going to easily read it from him because he's not necessarily the most surreptitious player, versus someone like Richard, who is very good at seating himself in a lot of different places and might be a little bit more squirrely by comparison. It's still tough because I think you are still banking on this idea of like, all right, I'll at least wake up on the beach tomorrow and maybe Ben will stop gunning for me at some point. I feel like if you're talking about players who are more likely to do that double down, as you mentioned before, Ben and Jackson would be in that category. But I think you bring up some good points that there are more pros to getting rid of Richard right now over Ben that I wasn't necessarily thinking of before.
Yeah, I think also there's something to be said about the person who has now survived 10 tribals out of 13. And he's only missed 3 tribals. I think that this is someone who knows and finds ways of escaping. I think that's definitely something to worry about. If you're looking at it from a threat level also, I think Ben is still someone who you can make others believe is a big threat. He is an athletic person. He can be looked at as A, B, C, D. Whereas Richard has been on the bottom long enough that I think enough people would kind of outright never think about him as a threat moving forward. So I think you can also look at it from that direction. And now we can talk about this also a little further, but then Ben has this somewhat connection with Brooke and them. So like, is that a bridge that can be mended? Is that something there that they can move away from? Whereas Richard wasn't really bringing a lot of allies to the yard.
Yeah, well, I mean, what's also interesting though is I feel like of, this group of 4, who does getting Richa benefit the most might be Brooke, honestly, because the 2 of them have never interacted, right? She doesn't know this man from a hole in the wall. She went into all the tribal councils that he didn't. And so that's not a relationship there. Simon and Keeley apparently had things with him, but as it shows, like, it doesn't matter when you feel like it's either taking out Mark and you're going to be next, or like getting rid of this guy, jettisoning him off to try to survive longevity into the game. All those relationships that were built up with kind of were done away with. RIP board of directors and the star-crossed romance between Simon and Rich, which is, again, really interesting from a storytelling perspective as to like what they were trying to make us think about Richard. Maybe it's that because he was so well connected here, as he sort of espouses in his final words, he was so caught in the middle that he was sort of talking out of both sides of his mouth. It also did feel like, I'm also wondering as well, like if Mark was like just legitimately really pissed off.
Oh yeah.
Like Richard might have drawn the short straw by being the person sat right next to Mark, because I wonder, like, would Mark have gotten up and whispered to Richard specifically, or was he just leaning over being like, okay, I can talk to Richard. Why are you doing this? And Richard try to plays fancy fencerton and be like, no, we're fine. I'm not doing anything. And that causes Mark to say, nope, we're turning this around. Ben, you could say another day. Richard, your cash flow is stopped here.
Yeah, I think that it's very interesting with Mark. When you hear Mark drop an F-bomb, it's curtains for that player. It's absolutely done. I hate that I keep harping on the Tez boot, but I do see eerily a parallel here between the two, where his legitimate response was, he's useless.
Yeah.
Let's just get rid of him. And here it was the exact same. He was like, nope. Wow. Blanked on his name. Richard's useless. Richard's effing useless.
He is the weakest effing ally of all time, he said. Mark, you're not helping the Russell Hands comparison when you use that particular form of syntax.
Yeah, of all time. Yeah, I think that, and I think it's funny because I think you're right. You know how sometimes they talk about, oh, this player, just whatever the last name is they get in their ear, that person's going, like, that's who they're going to vote for. With Marcus, whoever pisses him off last, he's going to get people to vote that way. Because if I'm Mark and I've not flashed an idol, and now I think that, okay, I'm still going to use the idol regardless, I control who goes home potentially, right? I just have to tell these other 3 people who to vote for, and they're going to vote that way. I think Richard pissed him off, Mike. I think we can talk about who benefits from this, or was this a better move, which I do think ultimately in the long run probably is. I still think that it probably came from a place of heart and not so much head.
Yeah, I mean, his voting confessional, right, of like, if you wear a suit on Survivor, you got to own it. I think part of it is, again, maybe him trying to make good TV, but I don't know. Part of it did feel a little bitter, did feel a little sour. And again, that exchange between the 2 of them obviously was like playful, but at the same time, I could imagine did feel a little charged of like, no, I'm pissed off at you. And so I'm going to get the last word here. So let's talk about this idol and, him getting up. The first mention he sort of alludes to with this is that he goes up to, when he has this conversation with Ben, he essentially says like, well, good job, man. You essentially just blew up your game. And so let's talk about the fake idol first, because Simon made a fake idol this time that he knows is a fake idol. That's progress,
That's huge.
That's massive. That he actually made one that he knows is false. But this time, again, irony of pure ironies, Pooya, that he had the actual fake idol that he thought was real, that he was not passing off as real. Everyone else was, and then he got in trouble for it. Now he has this fake idol that he gives to Mark. And again, there's layers within layers here, because even within this group of 4 that votes together, Simon, I assume, does not know that Mark has a real idol. So he legitimately thinks he's in danger. He leans over and whispers to him, I'm going to give you this fake idol. Pretend that you have it. And so that's the other really fun part of this, is that Mark is now brandishing this fake idol to sort of appease Simon and try to do the thing that has happened since the dawn of time with idols, of like, try to get people on edge, when actually the entire time, as you mentioned before, he has an idol and he's probably going to play it, and he's definitely going to be safe.
Yeah, it's very interesting for me, because when he gets up, and I do think part of Mark is a fan trying to make good TV, because I even feel like when he gets up and he gives this like speech, I'm talking about how he got this and he doesn't need it. He's got this, wearing a suit. There's a lot of pockets. Even in that moment, as he's doing that, you hear Simon ad-lib, that was a bluff. Like, Simon, I don't think wanted to get this back at all.
Mark, that's a fake idol. Don't play.
Yeah. Don't give it to me either. Like, what are you doing?
Yeah, he's having PTSD of like, no, I don't want this idol to be outed as a fake.
Yeah. So that was interesting to me. I love it. I love the forward thinking to make something from the stuff you got early doors. And I'm very curious to see how it could. Wait, hold on. Okay, remind me, Mike, unless I've watched these too quickly and missed anything. Does that mean that amongst the Returnee alliance, which by the way Keeley is a part of, there are 2 fake idols now?
Yeah. Oh yeah, we forgot that Keeley had the one that was pried off the lid. That doesn't seem like, at least from our perspective, she's told anybody about. So that's very fun that we've had between this foursome. We have 3 idols have been played between Mark and Brooke. And then the other 2 members have made fake idols that they are currently in possession of. I mean, talk about, asymmetric redistribution of wealth. This is really the 1% of idol holders here, both fake and real.
And let me tell you this, I'd probably bet a semblance of the farm that one of those 2 is going to find the next idol anyway, once it goes back to circulation. So I wouldn't be surprised. That's very fun, because now, did other people hear him say it's a bluff, or do we fully believe that he said it low enough that no one heard it?
Ben actually was the one that said, I believe through the captions, that he's the one that says, oh, it was a bluff. Like, I think he immediately clocked, okay, this was clearly a ploy, because that's also the big talk amongst Jackson in particular. He calls out like, okay, because Mark is also doing this like very subtle, not subtle, like flash of this big bulge at Tribal Council. He does it the first time sort of like to Ben, then he does it like across the way to Jackson, and eventually everybody knows about it. And I think that makes a lot of sense from Mark's part. As the Tribal Council started, I was thinking like, okay, should you pull a George here? Just flat out pull out the idol, put it around your neck, and say, I'm playing this for myself. I'm guaranteed to be safe. But I think Mark really wanted to try to escape without having to use this idol, as he somewhat whined about in confessional. Like, he did not want to leave this Tribal Council without this idol remaining in his pocket. So I think what he was honestly attempting to do up until the votes were cast was try to just scuttle as many people as possible to make them scurry. And yeah, people, they did not take the bait. They all still coalesced around Mark, because that's the other interesting thing as well, right? Is that from Mark's perspective, they are a block of 4. Basically, all they need to do is have this other group split their votes, which would make sense, right? Like, if they feel like they're an 8 or more, then they're like, okay, we'll split the votes between Mark and Brooke. Caleb kind of sort of does that half-ass. Brooke is also wondering this. And so they could win the day either on a tie, and that at least gives them a chance, or if some sort of wild plurality happens. Look, Mark has certainly been through a number of tribal councils at this point where a bunch of whispering happens and things get entirely scattered, and somebody goes home with like 5, 3, 1 vote in the form of Keeley. And so I think he was trying to just make a bunch of chaos happen in the hopes that enough votes are off of him that he doesn't need to play it. But then he sort of gets the read of the room. I think he's going to enough people and trying to suss out from their perspective via guilting them, like, okay, but are you actually voting for me? And I think once he finds out that enough people are doing that, he knows in his gut that he has to play it.
Yeah, I think that's the big thing, is that the way he used these conversations was a scare tactic, but also a temperature check of, have I done now? Can you answer the survey? Have I done enough to change your mind on voting me tonight? No. Interesting. Okay. Oh, and you're talking from the corner of your mouth, being shady. Okay, maybe I'll put your name down. Cool. Thank you for your survey. Appreciate you. I think that's not a bad call here, Mike, because I think if you are him, ideally you do leave with the idol, and like it is a balls of steel, like, moment where you do that. And if we're talking good TV, it's great TV to then have this all happen and then duck it. On the other end of things, I think sowing some seeds of distrust isn't bad. Like, even if you're like, I still think I have to play the idol, if one or two of them hopped off and hopped on with you, that could break things up. I think that opens up a lot more. Having the idol, I think this is the better move than, I'm just gonna wear it when we come in and be like, you can't vote me out, figure your next move, because then they could figure out their next move, and it could end up being a liability to your allies. Now your allies are cooked. So I think this is the better way to go about it, because ultimately a bunch of the people who are voting have to decide, and probably will decide, I'm just gonna vote him anyway because I don't think I'm the name, and in case he doesn't have the idol, that's good for me. I think there was enough people in this group that were like, well, I can tell it's not going to be me, so I'm just going to put his name down anyway.
Right. That's the thing, is that it was not an organized enough of an effort to be like, okay, now that we are aware there may be an idol in play, just in case you vote for Brooke, we will vote for Mark. Don't you worry. One of these returnees is going one or the other. I mean, you even have like Laws and Richard talking on the side, being like, should we swap our vote? Can we swap our vote? Again, this is what I talked about last episode as to why Lottie was such a good pick for what was the majority at the time, because like these are not groups that are necessarily coalescing as a cohesive unit.
Mm-hmm.
This was Ben kind of trying to align people under mutual interest, which was, hey, Mark's the head honcho, we need to get rid of him. And so it wasn't like then you have Ben sort of doing these hand signals, right? Being like, okay, hold. All right, now we're voting for Brooke. Let's turn things around, like the Kagayan Tribal Council, right? Where it's like, okay, do the other one.
Right.
Do the other one. They were not necessarily on the same page there. And so, yeah, you try to sort of find a moment to have a couple of them go. That's the reason why Sophie Clark even said at the time, but it certainly has been said in retrospect, the infamous Three Amigos Tribal Council, like, yeah, it's fun when Malcolm says, hey, we're all safe, so you can't vote for us, but we're voting for Philip. That basically then says, okay, well, if you're going to do that anyway, unless
I'll
I'm
just
Philip,
vote you just in case.
I have, in case I'm Philip, I have no reason to not vote for you because I'm not getting voted for. I'm not in danger, so let me prove my loyalty, make sure there's no blood on my hands when Philip leaves. Eric Reichenbach is the only one that sort of takes the bait on that. And we get something similar here with Caleb. I don't know what Caleb thought he was doing here, because I get it in concept, right? He's throwing a vote onto Brooke in case Mark plays the idol. Mark does tell him, my idol is real and I'm voting for Richard. So did he assume that this was going to be, besides him, a unanimous vote on Mark? And if Mark played the idol, it would be a tie between him and Richard? That feels like a fundamental misread of like him whispering with Brooke or whatever's going on at the other side of Tribal.
I'm not even going to begin to pretend that I'm going to understand what was going on in his mind with this. I think that, yeah, I don't know. Maybe we'll get some clarity. Was there a contingent of like, if something happens, we're all going to go on Brooke and then he's the only one left holding that bag? I don't think so. It didn't seem like you said, it didn't seem like this was a coordinated effort of, hey, in case we go here. The plan began and ended with we're dumping the votes on Mark, and that is it. The rest is fate, whatever happens. So I don't know if he tried to switch off last second or do something different. Did he think this was going to be this like Devin Pinto moment? Because it wasn't, right?
Yeah.
But also he doesn't go anywhere. He's fine.
Though the irony would have been if somehow Richard had an idol and played it too, Brooke would have gone home at, a few episodes after she did the exact same thing with Cameron at the Asha vote. Like, it's a smart thing if you feel like idols are flying around, but I also don't know exactly what Caleb was expecting respective to the rest of the group. We were obviously getting very specific perspectives as to who is talking with whom. I'm not sure what conversations were happening after this chat I guess technically speaking, right, Mark said this would be the last conversation he would have before they got up to vote. So this is maybe the last thing Caleb heard before he got up there. As you mentioned, he truly went rogue, but like, I don't think this is going to be helping things whatsoever. He started this episode saying, I hate being out of the loop. He ended the episode telling Mark, I hate when I'm out of the loop. And guess what? He still ended the episode out of the loop and having voted for another returnee who has every reason to come back at him now.
Yeah, I think what's going to be fun for us now, Mike, is truly where do we go from here?
Yes.
Because realistically, the numbers are still, there's a lot more of these new players and there's a lot less of these returnees. Do we see them decide to be like, okay, we took a hit, RIP Richard, but let's bounce back tonight? I don't know. I think that your point of Lottie leaving was kind of elite is because who is going to wrangle everyone together? It doesn't feel like, it looked like it could be Ben for a split second. I think that was a one and done. I think it was kind of like they mustered all their courage and power to get together and lock it in. I think they're about to scatter again. I think that it was held by duct tape and that duct tape has snapped.
Yeah, partially this is going to be me reading into the next time on where Ben talks to Mark about like some alliance he has and that there's an opening for a returning player. So I'm going to try to do some backwards math here to figure out what that is. So I would not be surprised if this has caused a schism in the Beauty and the Beast alliance. It cracks just like the enchanted mirror when Belle found the West Wing, where I think that Jackson, Simon, and Laws, Jackson, Ben, and Laws are working together. We even have a scene this episode where Laws is sort of like, yeah, Simon's kind of been the go-between with all of us, not wanting us to all talk together. Can we actually all talk together as the newbies that are working alongside these two returnees? I think the three of them are in lockstep, and so I think they will work together. I think especially in the wake of Laws losing Richard, who I think did seem to be a very good confidant for her. I think that will drive her more into the arms of Ben and Jackson. I think from there, like, Caleb's interesting, right? Because, like, in theory, he could be someone that you get on his side. On the other hand, you just saw him, like, low-key kind of get convinced by Mark to vote another way. And so is he someone you can necessarily rely on? Sally and Cameron, Cameron, as long as he's, just say, hey, Cameron, can you, like, say out loud what's happening at Tribal Council, and so we can adjust our plans accordingly? Because this man has brilliant reads, but unfortunately has no resources to be able to implement what's going on. So I could see at least a Ben, Jackson, Laws trio that maybe includes like a Sally or a Cameron in there to try to take control of the game. I think they would want to still look at Simon, at Brooke, maybe even Keeley to a certain extent, right? If they want to go back to the well of, well, if we can't take the shot at Mark, let's try to weaken him by taking out someone that is close to him. And Keeley's basically a returnee at this point.
I think that is a very interesting point to bring up. I think that Keeley being highlighted as basically one of the returnees almost feels like the most terrifying thing that could have been said of Keeley in this episode. They really wanted us to know that. And I think that's exactly why. I think if you can't beat them, join them. We're going back to the book, Mike. You talked about it earlier this episode, the playbook of, we could go Mark or we go for his closest ally, and it's like getting Mark anyway.
Yeah.
So Keeley is a great pick. I think Keeley also technically still, as much as they say, isn't really a returnee. So I think that would help for them. I think that I would be devastated because I've been loving watching Keeley play, but I do see that kind of being there. All right, we're going to strike. We're going to do things a little bit differently tonight, that we'll do this person instead.
Yeah, she's not a returnee, but she is a returnee sympathizer. That she is much more likely to work with them. I mean, she literally sided with the returnees over the newbies. It was that stark of a divide. I don't know, like there was some interesting Simon stuff going on in the first part of this episode. Like when they have these confessionals of him being like, I have a 100% voting record. No, maybe that was to set up the move that eventually didn't happen of like him and Ben and Jackson were going to swoop out under Mark and take out Caleb. It does make me worried, especially again, if I'm falling for this next time on of like, okay, now they're gunning for all returnees, not just Mark. Simon did just win an immunity challenge. And if you're Ben and Jackson and there's no love lost between you guys, that's another reason why like Ben could have been an interesting person to get rid of as well. Of like, I mean, have you seen him in these challenges? Yeah, the individual challenges have a different skill set presented, but like this guy is just an all-around beast. Simon's very similar, and so I don't know. I've got a bad feeling in the pit of my stomach. I'm no Cameron, but I'm not feeling great vibes about what might be happening with Simon too, considering like how much they set him as the most powerful person in the game at the beginning of this episode.
Hey, we just saw the vote out of a person who was self-described as in the middle. I think that sometimes the middle gets shanked, and I think that if that's gonna repeat itself, Simon is sitting right there ready to go. And I had completely forgotten about him winning immunity, which was this episode, but which
was very fun. I loved the very simple challenge at the end, right? Of just land the balls on the shells, but how Simon's was just much like his game position, right? Pooya teetering on the edge, nearly about to fall down, but it stops just short, maintaining that incredibly precarious position. We shall see if a downward roll is coming sooner rather than later for him.
I'm very intrigued. I'm very intrigued to find that out and see where we go from here with him. Because I think it's entirely possible. I also, by the way, that hill that they had to roll these balls up, I'm so curious because usually when you watch a challenge like this on Survivor, you've seen that ball enough times where you're like, you can probably tell how heavy it is. You can tell how you need to roll it. This was unlike any ball I've seen before. It was like the size of like a table tennis ball, but it was not as bouncy. It was clearly a lot harder, maybe a lot heavier, and it didn't roll conventionally. I was so curious.
Well, I think it's also a matter of the ramp. It's interesting because we sort of got like the pseudo vertical angle of it, the top down angle, and we didn't necessarily see until you get the side view that like this is a very steep ramp. So that's why I think a lot of people were struggling or overshooting in the case of a couple of these guys, is that I think it was sort of a tricky balance of like making sure there was enough power to get it all the way up, but not too much where it just goes over that really devilish sort of bump at the end and rolls off the shelf. I will also say, while we're just speaking briefly on the challenge, I'm never a fan, whether it's here in the new era, of like, okay, we're breaking into teams or pairs for the first part. So like, sorry, you don't get your chance of winning immunity because your group kind of sucked. I think that's why, Mark felt especially bad about what happened. But, it was a fine challenge to sort of yada yada through. Again, that this episode was just so wild to follow, Pooya, because it really does feel like the first half is completely different from the second half. Like the first half, because I'm assuming this takes place over the course of one day. The first half of the day, totally by the book, what we thought it was going to be. Is it Blanche? Is it Caleb? All that matters is that this, Beauty and the Beast plus Keeley and Mark is going to keep on rolling through. And then that ball rolled off that shelf in the second half when it says, okay, dump on Mark. Oh, okay, Mark's going to play Simon's fake idol. Oh, wait, Mark's going to play his Riedel idol. Oh, wait, Mark actually turned the votes at the last second on Richard. And I have to finish before we get to the Chizzy by going back to some of these exchanges that are being done. Please. Incredibly rude to David, but incredibly great TV as well. Just the pure, like, Mark's sort of like shit-eating glances and grins towards Richard of, you don't know what's coming, man. When Richard's explaining, like, I'll tell you why later, and Mark goes, will you? Are you sure about that? It was so good. Just the timing, and I really hope, I know so many things in Tribal Council are edited out of order. I know especially that's the case with Australian Survivor, but I am praying that this was actually the thing in real time when Richard and Mark are having this sidebar conversation, and Richard just says, hey, you wrote my name down before. Cut to David reading Richard's name, and then cut back to Mark. Well, I just did it again, buddy.
That was really good. I really liked that moment. I'm hoping it's not cut together. I mean, I'm happy it is because it was still good television, but I hope it was authentic television. You know what I mean? Like that would have made it even more magical. This episode was very, ironically enough, no pun intended, very rich.
Yeah, it really was. And it sucks to lose him here. It almost is kind of like Rich's edit, though, where like it's basically nowhere to be seen in the first half of the episode, then all of a sudden comes to major prominence. I think that's maybe the only downside I see of this episode is that it does sort of arrive at the conclusion as to why Rich a little abruptly. Now, maybe that was true to life, that Rich just happened to say the wrong thing at the wrong time, which was to say nothing at all. And Mark, as a result, turned everything onto him. I do suppose I'm talking myself more into setting up throughout Rich's entire run here, at least basically starting with the swap through to now, like the fact that he was so well connected in so many places and had so many different groupings. I mean, I said last episode how I thought that meant he was going to be pretty darn safe for a long time, but it just turns out that if you piss off the wrong guy at the wrong time and he's holding the idol, you could wind up getting sent out. And so it sucks to lose Rich here. He was such sort of like a weird, enigmatic, persona in the game. Here's another example of what I was saying at the very beginning of like, oftentimes it feels like people were like making moves for the idea of Rich rather than Rich himself, right? Keeley being like, well, I want to work with Simon, so I'm going to keep Rich. Simon and Asha being like, all right, we're going to throw the challenge because we've got to protect Rich. Mark saying, I've got to take out Rich so I could get to Simon firsthand. Rich was sort of this odd sort of piece being used in contract negotiations, and unfortunately he gets kind of thrown out as the last item in the final deal.
It feels mean, but I'm gonna make it now that I thought about it. It's like you're playing poker and you're like trying to use this chip and you're like, all right, well, I've got like 5 chips, so I'm fine. I got 4 chips, I'm fine. Then you look and you're like, oh, this is a cookie, I can't play this. And then you just put it aside. It really felt that way. He really was a bargaining chip for so much of the pre-merge, only to then get taken out. So that's the story of Rich here, which again, based on the draft that we had, I genuinely thought he was going to have like a 3-episode arc and leave. Yep. So he goes all the way to the second person voted out at merge.
Yeah, and it was also interesting too, going back to the wave strategy, right? Which he said was basically watch, adapt, sit back, evade, evolve. And that is arguably what got him the boot here, was that he was almost like too much in the back pocket, as he says in his final words, like, and again, I don't know if it really truly came down to like, if he was more decisive to Mark in that moment, he would have stayed. I'm very excited to talk with Rich and get his perspective on that, but it was at least presented to us as like, because he was a friend to everyone, he was not a friend to Mark in that moment, and so he had to go.
Whew. All right, Mark. Now we have one task at hand.
One task at hand, and it is a big one. Let us get to the Chizzy. No fake Chizzies wrapped up in any burlap here. It's the real McCoy. Take it away, Jacob Weinstein and MC Kala.
2, 3. 1, 1, 1, 3, 1, 1, 3, 1, 2, 3. It's getting kind of Chizzy. 3, 2, 1.
Okay, so I said this last episode, but I think it bears even more now that I could think that there's only a very select few people that we are going to be giving Chizzy points to. Though I will say, I did consider giving Ben a point. Because yes, Ben did say the quiet part out loud many times, but like, I do give him kudos for the number of times that people said, we can't go for Mark today, let's go for X person. The fact that he was able to get so many people on board with to saying Mark to the point where even when Mark is holding open his coat, brandishing this odd package, they still voted for him at the end of the day. Like, this man can move hearts and minds in a way we haven't seen before.
I'm not mad at it. I feel like, even Neville Longbottom got 10 points for Gryffindor. Like, that happened for sheer courage.
We'll see what happens when I get down to my one. I'm just floating it out there because I imagine I imagine, not to put words in your mouth, Pooya, but I imagine we're going to be fixating around the 3 returnees for our points this episode.
Why not 4 returnees, perhaps? Yes.
3.5 returnees.
Yeah, it was so funny because last week I came in here and I was like, man, you know who's the safest one here? Faith. You know who went home next? Faith.
To be fair, absolutely nobody could have seen that coming.
No.
Even Cameron couldn't have seen that coming.
No, absolutely not. No, I mean, I hate to be that predictable that Mike can call out my short list, but you have. I think it's just matter of fact speaking, they're 4 people technically now, and they had all the power because they had one idol among them, and because the other side overshared. I think this is potentially one of the harder lessons you learn being a player, is the fact that information is currency, and if you give everyone $1, then no one's making a profit because we all have the exact same dollar.
Oh, I love that analogy.
Thank you. I'm practicing. I'm not. I'm just saying stuff. So Mike, we go to the 3.
Mm-hmm.
Who gets the 3? I feel like he was the star of the damn episode. He played an idol. He is in such a good position that someone else gifted him a bluff idol to use to spook people. Brooke wanted nothing to do with him going. Keeley, who, by the way, not for nothing, Mark voted out Faith.
I know, that's wild.
And I genuinely at that moment thought, well, Keeley's like, all right, well, I'm a free agent. Goodbye. I'm going to go find new connections. She has doubled down. She has become the new Faith, and she is like riding with this man right now. So I think also the other thing that I liked about Mark's game, I think maybe the negative is being a little bit of it's not an a-hole. I'm not going to say that, but being a little arrogant. Having an idol can make you be that way, but also I like the tactic of being like, why are you doing this to me, man? How could you do this? And then seeing if they either take it like, man, I'm sorry, but it's a respect thing. Like, you're so good, blah, blah. Or they're like, oh, no. And then he's like, okay, well, I didn't like that either. Trying to use it to see who's voting with him, who's voting against him, who's going to stick to the path. I think those are all beneficial things. Do I feel like Mark's game is long for this world? Mike, I genuinely don't think so. But I also thought this way when he voted out, got Tez out that publicly with the stuff at Tribal. Then I also thought that when he came into Merge and was like, it was me. I took Faith out, man. It was all me. I know it was a weird thing. She was my close ally, and I'm sad, but it was me. I was like, okay, well, you're done now. And now I'm like, well, you're done now. And he's still here. So you're not being done. Take your 3. Try and go for another one next week with me, because I don't know where to go. I genuinely don't know where else I could go but him with a 3.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. I mean, I'll say right now, and I could be talked into this, Mark might get my 1. Because
where's Ben? Is Ben getting a 2 now?
And now, yeah, Ben, no, Ben does not supersede Mark here because Mark wins the day.
Okay.
But like, you also have to think about the fact that like Mark did have to play it. Mark did get, 7 votes against him at this tribal council. They're, as you mentioned, yes, he was able to survive in spite of all that, but all that basically accumulated to this point where if he did not have this idol, he would have gone home. I truly think, especially because it seems like nobody was telling him everything. Like Brooke communicated this to him with looks right before they went to Tribal, and that's when he did his work. And so he did a lot of good work. So that's why I'm trying to like debate between giving him the 1 or the 2 here. I'm talking myself into maybe, I think I'm going to give him the 2. I will give him the 2 for this because I do think what he was able to do at Tribal was interesting. The tactics didn't ultimately work, but I think they were sound. And he was able to play this idol, dictate who went home in the form of Rich. I think you brought up some good points that I didn't necessarily see initially as to like why Rich was a good choice for him, even if it was just for pissing him off. I am giving my 3 to Brooke because I think that while Simon, who, spoiler alert, will probably be my 1 at this point, is starts spurring this along. He hears it from Rich, and then he tells Brooke. I think we hear the most from Brooke's perspective in particular as to like, okay, I want to keep Mark in the game because of this, and that's why I'm doing this. And so it shows intentionality in her part that I'm glad we get some context behind, rather than just like, yeah, I'm working closely with Mark and I'll take him out eventually, so I definitely need to keep him in this game. It seemed like she had some specific motives, and I think she served as also a good reminder of the fact that, again, unlike Mark, if this is the thing that puts her over the edge on Mark in this episode, she was not in danger whatsoever. Mark took all of the votes. Yes, she was one of the last to find out, but Keeley and Sally were still pulling her aside. As she is expressed correctly, she is somehow evading a lot of attention on her at the moment. And so I do want to give her credit for that as well. She just won her first individual immunity challenge in a row in her Survivor career. And so they're like, nah, it's Mark. It's got to be Mark. And so I think that does speak volume as to where Brooke stands in the game and where she will continue to do so, because she accomplished her goal of not only keeping Mark in this game, but also getting rid of that dang idol.
I think that those are very good arguments. I think number one for me is the fact that you just won immunity last round. You didn't win it this round, and you weren't the first thing brought up of like, well, is this time we look at Brooke? She's safe. She is safe, and I think she gets everything she wants out of this. She wanted Mark's idol flushed. Guess what? Mark no longer has an idol. I think on the other side, Simon looks like the accomplice with that fake idol. I think on the other side, she is hiding in front of Mark now. She now knows, well, Mark's name's going to come up before me. That's a good spot to be in. So I think for those reasons, I'm going to go ahead and give Brooke my 2 points here.
Okay.
And you've already done such a salient job of explaining why. I don't need to reheat your nachos, if you will. So I'm going to go ahead and give my 1 point to Keeley.
Okay. So all of the 3.5 returnees being represented here.
I think that's only fair. I think that and like with the one, I like to give points. Sometimes it can be as jokey as, hey, if you are a player playing your first season and other people are seeing you as a returnee, that's some boss energy right there. Like, that's pretty damn cool. So I think that's very nice. I think, but on a real, I think it's great to put yourself in a position, because I think let's talk about this for a second, Mike.
I'm honored for the Freudian slip.
Hey, I hope you can return the favor later on. So here's the thing. I think that we talked about, and you already pointed out how for a long time in the pre-merge, it was, hey, we could get Mark, or let's go for his ally, and then the ally got clipped. I think once you get to the merge, it's kind of like you cleared qualifications. You're in the round robin now. And in the round robin, you do not want to face Mark. The closer you get to the end, you don't want to face Mark. You might face his allies. They might be a little weaker to you, or just weaker seeming. So I think now the pendulum has shifted. If you're one of Mark's close allies, I think there is safety in there. Now, mind you, I've already mentioned that I could see Keeley paying the price because they keep telling us she's a returnee. But I still also think that having Mark be such a distraction is good. There are still 3 returnees that you could be seen as the bottom of. And I think you can get away. And I still can't get over this, Mike, because was it in this episode? She did it again. Keeley was like, can you go bring him over here to talk to me? And people were like, yes, I will do that. I think, did she go get Sally to do that again?
She said, Sally, go get Simon to brought into this conversation when they start throwing out Ben's name.
How can she do this? She can't keep getting away with this. That's incredible. So yeah, take my 1. Quite frankly, this is the point I owed her last week when I gave it to Faith, maybe. Who knows?
There we go. It just came back around with interest. Just to briefly also illuminate why I gave a point to Simon. I mean, I think that the fake idol move was very fun, especially if, again, his goal was to keep Mark in here. And it did seem like, until the next time on, like, Mark is his shield. People were not, even when people were pissed off at Simon, people were looking to take out Mark over Simon here. Also give him, some extra credit for the immunity win as well. And honestly, as much as he might be gloating about it at the beginning of the episode, it does seem like he may be in the best position he's ever been in his Australian Survivor career, in that he was in Beauty and the Beast. He's in with this Boomerang alliance with Mark and with Brooke, and sort of with Keeley on the side as well. He was working with Keeley during the Lottie vote. Now, again, this might all go pear-shaped next vote, considering how maybe now having this anti-returnee sentiment so out in the open might completely split things apart. But Simon had a good thing going basically through him getting the necklace here. And the fact that he made this his own sort of concerted effort to be able to save Mark, to the point where, again, also why I give Brooke credit, is like, when this information gets passed to them, they could not tell Mark. That's basically how you get Mark out, right? Is like, if they're in on the plan and they don't tell Mark, that's it. Mark is done. Mark could pick up on some stuff, but like, if they don't inform him what's happening, then the plan goes through. So they took adamant efforts to make sure the plan did not go through. They succeeded. And so I think it makes sense that, despite being only 4 votes out of 12, they're the ones that when they win the day, they win the Chizzy this week.
Yeah, no, they were Mark's keeper this episode, and they really decided to give him another chance and keep him alive in this game. And now we get to see how it all plays out, Mike, and I'm very excited about that.
Well, you won't have to wait very long because tomorrow we'll be back. We're finally in our Sunday, Monday, Tuesday realness. At this moment, I'm scheduled to talk with someone who knows Mark very well, may have voted against him a couple of times. Caroline Cordes from Australian Survivor Titans versus Rebels will be joining me. I'm sure she'll have many takes about all the stuff Mark is doing so far in this season and will assumingly do in the next episode as we finish off week 5, which started again a little bit more straightforward, but got real twisted like a crazy straw very quickly. So we shall see what shape we end the week on. In the meantime, Pooya, talk to me about what you've got going on this week in your own crazy straw of podcasting.
Well, I am talking 90 Day. I'm on my ultimate catch-up journey. Another 2 episodes done and dusted with Annabelle this week, who middle of the podcast I convinced to join me next week for the next 2 episodes. So it's like big Annabelle 2 weeks here for 90 days. Then we'll be caught up fully and we'll go to week. It's going to be great. And then myself and Liana, of course, talking over on the lounge every week. This episode was as good as the others. We finally got to the form. We had a lot of questions in our form sitting there. So we went through and answered all of those. And find me on twitch.tv for when I'm not podcasting.
Oh, by the way, Pooya, what did you make about the triangle offense mention of these short-lived, the maybe not so short-lived alliance with Mark and Ben and Jackson?
Do you think that's what got them? One of them just does not like the Bulls and was like, I've had enough of this guy. We are not doing this.
I mean, it feels so admittedly like Amerocentric of me, but I always do wonder sometimes like how popular other sports are in other countries. So I was like, you're making a 96 Bulls reference right now. Jackson is 24 years old. This man does not know Jordan in his heyday. Do you think he understood the reference whatsoever?
I feel like, so I'm a new basketball fan in the last like couple, like maybe 10 to 15 years. So I wasn't really on top of the Jordan of it all. But triangle offense and like the 96 Bulls, I feel like that kind of transcends the sport. It's like, you know Jordan, you know he was on the Bulls, you know he played around the 90s because Space Jam really, for the normies, it really put the whole lore into perspective. So I think they knew. I think they were just, maybe you know what it was, Mike? Maybe it was like, yeah, I want to be part of the triangle offense. Then Ben says like, he's using my love of sports against me. He's manipulating me. I do not want to be part of the triangle offense. I'm a free agent. I'm leaving.
Yeah, I'm also trying to think of like, I mean, there were many triangle offenses, but I'm thinking back to like the Bulls' heyday. Like Mark is clearly Michael Jordan. I think that Jackson has to be Dennis Rodman between the two, just given his wild streak and his ring persona. And so I guess that makes Ben Scottie Pippen by default.
Yeah, I think so. I think that makes sense, right?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, it's kind of like, hey, I've been paid not enough. You're being paid too much. It's my time. Yeah, well, maybe, Mike, maybe when we cover this show for another, let's say, 10 seasons.
Yep.
And then in 10 seasons from now, people are talking about trying to be the 2015, 2016 Golden State Warriors. Maybe that's where we're going to be. Or someone's going to be like, I'm like Kawhi on the Raptors. Maybe that's where we go.
Well, listen, if you're going to Steph Curry favor with us, reference American sports as much as you can in this podcast. But regardless, we'll be back for another quarter of this, I guess more so period, I suppose, because there's 3 of them this week of Australian Survivor Redemption. As tomorrow I'll be joined with Caroline Cordes to bake down episode 15. Wow, we are already 15 episodes through.
Wild.
Yeah, we are approaching 10 or so episodes, less than, until we get to the end of this whole thing. And if this episode is any indication, it's going to keep on being a wild ride, and I'm loving every second of it. Hopefully you all are as well. Thank you all, as always, so much for listening. Until tomorrow, everybody, take care. Bye-bye.
This is RHAP. We know reality TV.